Hello, and welcome back to the #1 survival guide of the cylinder. And today, we should take a look at the cylinder's many parasitic animals that have adapted specifically to prey off humans. But first, we shall explore the more metaphorical parasites that more so leech off of humanity's resources. And then, closer to the end, we shall look at the more biological parasites. And as our first creature of the day, we shall take a look at a chicken coop in the Valley of the Sun. At first, you didn't notice anything wrong. It seemed quite peaceful, in fact. Bird song, the smell of the forest, and chickens roaming around the pen. However, you noticed one that was slightly bigger than the other. It appeared to be a juvenile cockatrice. While the cockatrice may appear like a strangely mutated rooster, they are actually more closely related to the ancient ancestor of all birds. They went extinct approximately 65 million years ago, and survived into the modern day by leeching resources from chicken flocks in a similar fashion to parasitic birds that will lay their eggs in other birds' nests with the intention of their chicks outgrowing the native chicks by stealing all the food for themselves, which is the reason for their striking mimicry of chickens. And now on to our next creature, the house goblin, native to primarily the Sylvan Hills, but also a small population in the Iron Mountains. You found yourself in a wine cellar lit by torchlight, and in the shadow behind two barrels, you thought you could almost make out the faintest of light coming from two yellow pinpricks staring back at you. They were the eyes of a house goblin. House goblins are the smallest of the goblins, and in the wild would have found home within hollow trees and fallen logs. However, in the modern day, they more commonly take refuge within humans' homes, in basements, attics, cellars, and even within your own walls. They survive off rats, mice, and other vermin, and occasionally take small pieces of food from your own pantry. However, if you do not wish for the house goblin to protrude on your personal space, there is something you can do. If you leave out something sweet, like a pastry or honey, as an offering for these creatures, they will often do some kind of chore for you around the house, like cleaning out the fireplace, or even giving you something back that you had lost within your own home previously. Now on to the more terrifying biological parasites. Starting with the werewolf. Werewolves are mainly native to the south of the Sylvan Hills, bordering on or even inside the dark forest, as well as a somewhat large population in the birch and aspen groves. You found yourself walking through the heart of the eastern wilderness, when suddenly your eye was drawn to a patch of moss or lichen on a rock with many blue flowers sprouting out of it. And suddenly, you smelled pastries and sweets, and you were drawn closer. Eventually, the urge to eat one of the flowers overcame you. You had just unknowingly fallen victim to the first stage in a werewolf's life cycle, entailing the lichen producing a sweet smell from its spores to attract an animal to its presence that will then eat part of the lichen. And from that point forward, they are infected, and the lichen will slowly spread throughout their body. And at first, you likely won't notice anything. Maybe a few strange growths on your scalp, but nothing too strange, until one night you will go through an extreme physical change, entailing your body being filled with necromancy magic, growth hormones, and testosterone, resulting in personality traits similar to people who have rabies, and physical traits that make you look like a wild beast. And from this point, you will begin to try and break out of your house and search for a large animal, usually a wild boar or another human. And once you have located them, you will bite down hard on their flesh and begin releasing spores from your mouth into the open wound, permanently paralyzing the animal, and also infecting it. And in the coming days, the body will abnormally decompose much faster than normal, and go on to feed an entire colony of life, perpetuating the cycle. However, werewolves typically only grow during the early spring, typically right after the snow melts, so you don't have to worry about them for most of the year, and for the small pocket of time that you do, just make sure to lock your doors and beware of anything that smells like too sweet out in the forest. And now, for our final parasite, vampires. Living in primarily sewer systems of cities and caves. You find yourself in the sewers of the Imperial City, the capital city of the Sylvan Hills. It was dark. You could barely hear anything other than the sound of dripping water from the ceiling. It was also very dark, but there was just enough light to make out a faint silhouette of a head peeking out of the water. It was a vampire master. Vampires are quite possibly the most terrifying and dangerous creatures known to man. The history of vampires in the cylinder is also very extensive, as they are actually not natural. They were created 600 years ago during the Necromancy War as unstoppable super soldiers that would act as foot soldiers for the necromancers, and they survived into the modern day by hiding in caves and dark places, and eventually sewers, which leads us into the modern day in the Imperial City, where the vampire infection has spread like wildfire. And now for their biology. Vampires rely on humans almost entirely for their life, their sustenance, and everything. It all starts when a vampire egg hatches at night and crawls up through the plumbing of someone's house and out of one of the drains. From there, it will search for a sleeping human, and will then climb onto your neck and administer a paralyzing venom, and then will begin to surgically remove parts of your flesh with its mandibles, and crawl under your skin. It will then begin to latch onto your spine, and start the surprisingly quick process of merging its soul with yours, to allow it to use necromancy magic. And from this point forward, you are no longer alive, but your body is. It will then begin to use necromancy magic to edit your genes, making them compatible with its arachnid genes. And now that it has access to a human brain, it instantly knows how to walk and use every function of the human body, as well as access your memories, however without any of the emotional attachment to them, using them as a source to find their next meal, being human blood. It is to continuously drink human blood, is because, if it doesn't, its human host body will begin to develop invertebrate-like features, destroying its camouflage in the human population. And if a single vampire becomes successful enough, it will create a nest underground in the sewer, where it will begin to lay eggs of a specific kind that hatch a specific kind of larva that, if fed a human body, will create a cocoon around it and mix the DNA of the human and the arachnid much more seamlessly than you did with your own human host. And it will create an abomination that will defend the nest while the master vampire is away. And as for what humans can do about this, well, just don't go out at night and keep your drains locked, and if you suspect that there is a vampire in your section of town, simply arrange an appointment with a vampire exterminator. And that now brings us to the end of this chapter of the Survival Guide.